You're a winner this winter when you play Borgata's Winning Wonderland. From now through December 28th, earn entries in slot and table games for your stake in over $1 million in prizes, including two 2025 Land Rover Range Rovers, each valued at over $150,000. Drawings take place every Saturday, with grand prize drawings on November 30th and December 28th. For details, visit theborgata.com. Winning Wonderland, only at Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Casino, alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Lincoln Financial Field, getting set for the Eagles' Week 9 matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Olivia. I fended off the Halloween candy coma. I'm here. It's a little vintage inspired at the link today. The Kelly Greens are out. The field looks a little different. So, yeah, I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the show.
We're happy to have you here too, EJ. I also fended off that candy coma. Hope you all had great Halloweens out there with your family. It's very true. As always, you can be a part of our conversation too. Head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Leave us a comment, a question, whatever is on your mind. We will try to get to some of those toward the end of our show today. And then also we'll be over there throughout the game too. So we look forward to chatting with you all over there. All right. EJ, we've got a lot to discuss as it relates to the health, particularly of the Jaguars, but let's go through the situation today for the Eagles. So we know that cornerback Darius Slay is out today. He has been dealing with a groin injury sustained last week, so he will not play. We've got Dallas Goedert. He continues to be out with a hamstring injury. This is his third straight game. And in turn, because we won't see Slay start today, we will most likely see Isaiah Rodgers make his first start since 2022. He was the one who came in place of an injured Darius Slay last week against the Cincinnati Bengals. So when you look at this big change, I would say, Slay has been a key part of this Eagles secondary for the last several years. When you look at this big swap here with Rodgers starting in his place, how do you feel about his odds at success going into today's game against the Jaguars?
Yeah, I think you can feel reasonably good about it, especially, obviously we'll get to injuries later, but, the matchup isn't going to be the most excruciating. Obviously, it won't be as tough as it was last week for him when he came in against Jamar Chase cold. So, yeah, I think the Eagles they have got decent depth at those positions, and I think Isaiah Rodgers as a guy, he's got experience starting in the NFL. I thought he looked pretty good throughout training camp. He got a lot of snaps with the first team defense. So, there are positions that the Eagles could be worse off if they were missing a player like Darius Slay at, for sure. I feel like, if they were going to be without, one of their key veterans, I feel like cornerback is a spot that they can kind of withstand that. I mean, even beyond Isaiah Rodgers, I feel like Keely Ringo is somebody that, if you needed him for a game here or there, I think he could hold up. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about Isaiah Rodgers. I actually think that, it's probably, it's a good opportunity for him to show how far he's come. It's been a while since he's played a full game.
Absolutely. I'm eager to see how he performs in today's game, especially after his performance last week, coming in and creating the pass breakup against Jamar Chase that led to CJ Gardner-Johnson's interception. It was a big play from him, who we do know is playing for the Eagles in today's game. Mekhi Becton is back after dealing with a concussion last week. We saw Tyler Steen in his place. Becton expected to start at right guard. And then, of course, Fred Johnson continues to start at left tackle in place of an injured Jordan Mailata. This is the third straight game of Fred Johnson playing in place of Mailata. Last week, he had a lot of success against Trey Hendrickson, was a big part of the Eagles' pass protection and keeping Jalen Hurts clean for the most part throughout the game. So we're looking to see more of that in today's game, and that'll be a big key to the Eagles' success. All right, now I think the biggest news surrounding this game in terms of health has to do with the Jaguars and where they are at currently. Going into today's game, we knew that left guard Ezra Cleveland, he's dealing with an ankle injury. He was going to be out. We also knew that Christian Kirk had suffered a season-ending collarbone injury. He is on injured reserve, and he is not going to be suiting up, obviously, on injured reserve. So the two of them out for sure. And then we just got the inactives list for the Jaguars. Gabe Davis, another receiver there, is out. And then, yeah, those are the two big names, I would say. So we know that Davis is out and Cleveland is out. So that being said, there were a lot of questionable players going into this game for the Jaguars, including running back Tank Bigsby dealing with an ankle injury. We saw that Travis Etienne, he has been dealing with a hamstring injury. Both of those players are active. Right guard Brandon Scherf dealing with a knee injury, active as well. And then wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. dealing with a chest injury, also active. So a couple of very important players to the Jaguars not playing in today's game. However, they're getting a lot of their other core members, especially of their offense there. However, dealing with some injuries still. What do you expect to see out of, especially this receiving core, EJ, that is dealing with a lot of attrition?
Yeah, it's tough to know exactly what to expect from this group. There's just going to be so many moving parts. And obviously, the Jaguars passing offense wasn't super consistent even before that. Brian Thomas Jr. is a really important piece for them. So I'll be very curious to see if he's able to play, and then, how close to 100% he is if he is able to play. It doesn't seem like, I guess from the reporting earlier today that it doesn't seem like he's going to be in the lineup. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a big challenge, for the Jaguars. I mean, they're coming off of a decent game, against the Packers, but again, this has been a very inconsistent passing offense, and now they really are missing most of their, key options in the passing game. I mean, Evan Ingram is a good player, but still, their wide receiver core has really been hit hard.
All right, let's transition into our latest headline segment. Eagles are coming off of a resounding victory over the Cincinnati Bengals last week. And what made it so resounding, I think, it was just that it was a complete game on offense, defense, special teams. We saw a lot of balance between the run and the pass on offense. We saw a pair of takeaways, as we already mentioned, on defense. So the Eagles have this chance to go 4-0 out of the bye week against the 2-6 Jaguars. This Jaguars defense in particular is one of the weak spots of this team. They rank second to last in the league in EPA per play allowed. And as we already mentioned, they're dealing with a lot of injuries, particularly on offense. But when you look at this game, EJ, do you feel like this is a slam dunk win for the Eagles, or are there a few things that they need to be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they have a lot of advantages on paper. I think that there are a lot of ways they can win the game, but I don't want to sound too much. I don't want to use coach speak this early in the show necessarily, but this is the NFL. You can lose to just about anybody in the NFL, even against a team like the Jaguars, who have been struggling and now have some serious injuries that they have to account for. So yeah, the Eagles definitely have a massive advantage on paper. Like I said, I feel like they could win this game, with a pass heavy approach. I feel like they could win this game with a run heavy approach. I feel like the defense could dominate. I feel like there's a lot of different things that could happen for them to win the game. But I think it's also important to keep in mind, the Jaguars have nothing to lose at this point. They are kind of playing for their season. Doug Peterson's coming back. So yeah, without too much, I guess, giving away my prediction for the game, I do think that there's the chance here that the Jaguars kind of play above what their record would suggest. I think the Eagles are still going to need, to put together some of the performances, a performance like the ones that we've seen them have coming out of the bye week.
Mm-hmm. One of the keys for this Eagles defense is going to be making sure that Trevor Lawrence doesn't get into a rhythm early. He has been playing better after a pretty difficult month. His first 4 games of the season, he had a 53.28% completion. He had a 78.9 passer rating. He's generally been good at getting the ball out quickly, and it's important to know that he isn't afraid to take shots. But that being said, as we've already mentioned, he is down a number of his weapons in the passing game, so something to keep in mind there too. On the ground, they're expected to today get Etienne back. Bigsby has been one of their bright spots on offense. He is really good at making defenders miss in the open field, which we know was a big issue for the Eagles, especially early on in the season. They have cleaned up their tackling mightily in recent weeks. When you think of Vic Fangio and what he might do in his approach to this Jaguars offense, where do you feel like he's going to commit the most resources to?
Yeah, given who's out for the Jaguars, I could see them having a run heavy approach, at least being reliant on the run game. I mean, they've got talent in the backfield. And sometimes when you're down a couple of offensive linemen, I feel like it's easier to say, just go forward, just try and move people in the run game rather than try and hold up in pass protection. So yeah, I think that you could see them, have a little bit more of a run heavy approach. I know that's not necessarily what Eagles fans would expect from Doug Peterson, given his tenure with the Eagles, but I could see that being something that they could do. Especially when you think about their tight ends. Evan Ingram, like I mentioned earlier, they've got Bretton Strange as well. Could they come out in 12 personnel and run the ball heavily? That is something we've seen Doug Peterson do. Use a lot of 12 personnel. So yeah, I think that there's a chance for that. And if to answer your question, if they're going to come out in heavy personnel sets and try and leverage the talent they have in the backfield, I feel like the Eagles are going to need to come out and stop the run on early downs. It's really been one of the biggest differences from before the bye week to now, coming out of the bye week, is that I feel like they've been doing a lot better on early downs, getting teams into third and long situations, known passing situations where they can rush the passer. If you can do that against this Jaguars offense, I think Trevor Lawrence is a type of quarterback who you can, force turnovers on. So yeah, I think that's going to be the key to the game, is like being able to, keep them out of those early, second and 4, third and 3 type of situations.
On the other side of the ball, the Eagles offense seems like it's finally starting to click and get into a groove. I feel like a big reason why has been because of the fact that Jalen Hurts has been playing within a really clean pocket for the most part. He was pressured just 3 times last week on 22 dropbacks, according to Pro Football Focus. As we already mentioned earlier in the show, Fred Johnson was stellar against Trey Hendrickson, limiting him to just 1 pressure on 13 matchups. The Jaguars, if you look at the stats, they really haven't done such a great job at generating pressure on quarterbacks. They also really don't blitz a whole lot. They have the lowest blitzing defense in the league at just 16.6%. When you look at all of those factors surrounding the Eagles offense today, the fact that if once again they're able to have that sort of similar success in protecting Jalen Hurts, how likely is it, do you think, that they could have maybe a similar performance as they did this past week against the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly on the table. This Jaguars defense is very reliant schematically on just players making plays. They don't, like you mentioned, they don't blitz very often. They rely on their 4-man rush to get home. On the back end, they play a lot of man coverage. And, that's a bad combination we've seen play out so far this season. They've really struggled in part because, if you're not going to generate pressure and you're in man coverage, it's only a matter of time before guys get open. And honestly, that really plays into the Eagles' hands. They've got matchup advantages. The Eagles like their matchup advantage. The Eagles like their matchups with AJ Brown every week. It's not like there's very many corners in the NFL where they wouldn't feel good, with who's lined up across from AJ Brown. So, to answer your question, I do think that this is on the table for the Eagles to have a really dominant game. They could have a dominant passing game, could have a dominant running game. I feel like, what we've seen from the offense, this play action heavy, kind of run teams out of those 2 high safety looks and then take advantage of the matchups on the outside. I think that that's very much on the table today, given the Jaguars' history of playing a lot of man coverage.
Yeah, we got to see a lot of play action this past week. Got to see a lot of under center last week. We'll see if the Eagles try to marry those things a little bit more, because most of their play action was still out of shotgun last week. Got to see a lot of runs out from under center too. So we'll see exactly how the offense continues to evolve. Let's now continue into the fan zone. Happy to take some of your questions and comments, everything that is on your mind. Let's take this one here from CPT Athens. They say that they're not convinced just yet about this Eagles team. Don't know which Eagles team will show up. I feel like that was a big concern of ours early in this win streak. We weren't sure, especially on defense, if the defensive issues of recent past would rear its head again, including some of those issues with stopping the run, missed tackles. The list goes on. However, lately they've been a lot better at stopping the run. They've been a lot better at making those tackles and getting players down. They've also made some personnel changes. We've got Cooper DeJean now starting in the slot in place of Avonte Maddox. And things have been trending in a really positive direction for him. When you look at this game, EJ, do you feel more confident than you were maybe in weeks past about the Eagles' likelihood of success, given the fact that we've seen a little bit more consistency, or is the jury still out? Is it too early to say that this Eagles team is able to win consistently in the right way now?
Yeah, I think that there's still a lot to learn about this team, in various matchups. I think if I had to pick one side of the ball that I'm confident in, real meaningful progress, I would say I would pick the defense, honestly. I feel like, some of those issues early in the season with tackling, I just feel like, they've kind of sorted that out, as you mentioned earlier. And I feel like they've kind of just found what works for them. I think that obviously in the run game, they've been so much better. And I think that Cooper DeJean has been a big part of that, being able to come downhill and be effective. And honestly, in coverage, he's been just as effective. I think, I was talking to some people earlier this week about, Cooper DeJean and how he's kind of fit into the system. And it seems like he's really kind of advanced for a rookie. He feels like he's kind of, just really comfortable in the scheme and kind of understands even the framework around him, not just his own role, but the roles around him. So, yeah, I think that, the defense has shown some meaningful progress. I think that we've seen them do it against different types of offenses, which is important. Offensively, I do think that there's still a lot to learn. I think that we haven't seen them air it out, in a game where they get, behind early. We haven't seen them, kind of have to win different ways necessarily. And maybe they won't have to very often. I think that their formula puts them in a position where they might not have to do that very often. But I do think that there are going to be times, against really good teams where they might have to vary their approach. I think we're going to see, how that plays out over the course of the season. Maybe not today. I don't know if the Jaguars are going to get out to a quick lead, but the Jaguars can put up points still. So, I do think that each week is its own season. Each week you have a lot of new information. Yeah, I do think it's fair to say that the jury might still be out on the team for sure.
For your question, let's take this one from Lobster. They say tough stretch approaching, have to bank our vote. As in the Eagles have maybe a bit of a tougher schedule upcoming. Next week they head to Dallas to face the Dallas Cowboys, a place that they have not had a lot of success winning on the road. And then the following week, the Eagles get to face on Thursday night the Washington Commanders, who have been red hot as of late. And last I checked, I believe they are still beating the Giants. Yes, 21-10. The Cowboys right now losing to the Atlanta Falcons, 21-10. And then the following week after that, they get the Rams on Sunday Night Football. And then the week after that, the Ravens. So like it's a tougher stretch. The Rams have been playing better as their receivers have gotten healthier. So when you look at that stretch, that is not. I would say last year we saw the Eagles have a little bit of a gauntlet around this time of the schedule, and I would say this year it is much less of a gauntlet. However, there are still some challenging games, especially on the road, that the Eagles have upcoming. How important is it to continue to play hard through this stretch in particular and get this win, knowing that tougher opponents are coming up?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important. I feel like when you look at that stretch between the Jaguars, the Cowboys, and the Commanders, you think they probably need to win at least two of those three to kind of hold, keep pace with the Commanders. Going into that game, that Commanders game could be huge in terms of like who's going to kind of be, in the lead going into that playoff push. So, yeah, I mean, this is an important stretch. Like you mentioned, they had that really hard stretch last year, and they kind of got found out during it. I do think that that's on the table still. I think that, like I mentioned, we have a lot to learn about this team in different types of games. Being able to beat the teams you're supposed to beat is a very important part of, making it to the playoffs and, being able to, kind of be in a position to, win the division late in the season.
Thank you so much. Let's take this one from friend of the show, Jay Malone. They say they went from no talent at cornerback to an abundance of riches. Isaiah Rodgers has looked great filling in when Darius Slay went down this past Sunday, and you can't say enough about how the two rookies are playing. EJ, you already talked a little bit about Cooper DeJean and the success that he is having lining up in the slot. Quinyon Mitchell he's had some really tough matchups over really the entire season. He's gone up against some really talented receivers, and there have been receivers who have certainly made plays against him, Jamar Chase included. However, Mitchell has looked really good for the most part. I think what stands out to me as a rookie for him is that he doesn't often make the same mistake multiple times. When we see him make a mistake, it seems like he learns and he doesn't do it again, which I think when you're dealing with a 23-year-old rookie cornerback is as much as you can ask from someone like him. What is your big takeaway from the way that these two cornerbacks have been playing so far to start the season?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a little shameless plug here. I wrote a story in Sunday's Inquirer about the Eagles pass game coordinator / defensive backs coach, Christian Parker. He's one of the guys like behind the scenes that I think has been instrumental in those two players, Mitchell and DeJean, kind of coming along so quickly. In the story I mentioned, like, during special teams drills, Quinyon Mitchell doesn't have a lot to do. He's not in any of the special teams units. So I noticed that Christian Parker will pull him off to the side and make him go through like press technique reps. And, that's like kind of like a window into what I think Christian Parker's teaching style is and kind of why those guys have been able to come along so quickly. He's very, focused on efficiency with them. And I found it interesting that like he mentioned that he teaches them NFL 101, which, he basically doesn't know what they don't know. So he goes all the way down to like the most fundamental parts of the game in a way that maybe it's like, okay, they already knew all of that, but he's like, if they pick up one thing, then he's happy, if he picks up like, the distance between the hashes or something like that. And I do think that it shows and how these guys have been able to develop so quickly. You think about Quinyon Mitchell, he was the starting outside cornerback in week 1. Obviously, Cooper DeJean had an injury. It kind of delayed him a little bit. But yeah, those two guys playing that quickly, they both credit Christian Parker a lot for, his role in that. I definitely think it shows. And when you watch how the defense has turned around.
Yeah, no, it's been, he's had a lot of success so far with these two guys. We'll continue to see them as they perform and if they're able to continue to progress, to progress in their games. Highly recommend checking out EJ's story. Let's take this last question here from Big Left Fist. They say, with the offensive talent that the Eagles have, that they should not be endangering Jalen Hurts this much on quarterback sneak plays, also known, if you in the Eagles ecosystem, the brotherly shove, the tush push. Listen, we know if on any given drive, it's 4 downs. It's the Eagles they're not punting it on 4th and 1. This is even honestly, they could probably run it on 4th and 2 sometimes. How do you feel about the continued incorporation of the tush push in this offense, and the way that the Eagles continue to rely on it in a number of situations?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes a lot of sense. And at times where they are in 4-down territory, they can almost play for the 4th and 1. I feel like there have been times where they've overdone that, but this year I definitely think that's been a factor. I kind of agree with Big Left Fist here about, like, if it's 3rd and 1 and, especially if the game isn't close, like, you don't always have to run it, because I do think that there is some injury risk, not just for Jalen Hurts, but the offensive lineman. I mean, there's been plenty of times where those guys have gotten up slow from that play. I definitely think, you can overuse it, especially when you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. You have some options there. You got some variability. But listen, I mean, it is like the great equalizer for them at times. You watch other teams in college football and the NFL, and they really struggle in those short yardage situations. And the Eagles, they do. They have like a real advantage because they can, on a 3rd and 4, play for 4th and 1. A lot of teams don't want to do that necessarily, or maybe, aren't as aggressive to do that. But yeah, I definitely think, it's an important play for them. But yeah, they probably could give it to Saquon Barkley a little bit more down there.
I tend to lean more on the side of they should tush push as often as humanly possible, because you never know. 3rd and 1, if you're getting a negative yardage play, I think, especially depending on where the Eagles are on the field, that's not good. I think play it safe, tush push it if there is injury risk there, and that's something that the competition committee, when they were making that decision whether or not they would put any sort of either ban or limitations on this play, that's something that they considered. However, we don't get all that information, but that obviously the Eagles and the NFL teams across the NFL are allowed to continue to run this play. But it's a good point that you make there. Anyway, I'm sure we will continue to have meaningful discussions about the tush push as the season progresses. Thank you very much, Big Left Fist, for your question. Let's transition into our player picks. EJ, we have named a number of different players that we are going to be keeping our eyes on throughout today's game. However, if you had to pick one, who are you most eager to see in their performance today?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how Nolan Smith and Bryce Huff can get after Trevor Lawrence today. Most notably, I would say Nolan Smith. He's had a sack or a half sack in each of the last 3 games. He's really kind of come along as a pass rusher. Obviously, he was pretty quiet his rookie year and started the year pretty slowly. But he's really, like I said, he's come on. He seems like he's kind of, adding moves to his arsenal. He's not just, as repetitive as maybe he was earlier in his career. I mentioned it earlier. Trevor Lawrence can be a turnover-prone quarterback. I feel like every game I watch Trevor Lawrence, he has at least one instance where it's like, man, I can't believe that he put the ball on the grass or that he threw that pass into that tight window. So I definitely think if you can affect him, get pressure on him, there is that opportunity for you to generate turnovers against him. And it's also important to note that the Jaguars traded away Cam Robinson after benching him. So he's going, they'll be going up against I guess Walker Little's technically the starter at this point, but he didn't go into the season as the starter. I guess they're not going up against the Jaguars week 1 starter at left tackle. And as we mentioned, they have injuries on the interior line as well. So I think it could be a big game for the Eagles pass rush. I think we're going to learn a lot about them. And yeah, I think Nolan Smith's kind of central to that.
I'm also going to stick with the defense, and it's a player we've already discussed today. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how Isaiah Rodgers performs in today's game. As you mentioned, EJ, the caliber of talent that he is going to be going up against pales in comparison to last week when he subbed in for Darius Slay and was going up against Jamar Chase. That being said, Rodgers has been very optimistic and positive throughout this entire experience, coming into this Eagles team, having not played last season as he was suspended for a year for violating the league's gambling policy, and has really just appreciated whatever opportunity comes his way. And that has often just been a special teams role. However, even the 4 special team snaps I think he started his very first game that he played for the Eagles, he was grateful to be able to be out there. So I'm very eager to see how he approaches this opportunity, if he is able to make yet another play as he made last week in setting up CJ Gardner-Johnson's interception. But he is someone I'm certainly going to be having my eyes on in today's game. All right, and now it is time to make our predictions for this game. The crystal ball is out. We are going to look into the future, and to make our predictions, I am pleased to welcome in Jeff McLean. But Jeff, before you give your prediction for today's game, I am curious which matchup you are most intrigued by.
Well, I think one of the interesting ones will be on the Eagles offensive side with A.J. Brown versus Tyson Campbell, cornerback extraordinaire. Campbell's missed some games this season because of a hamstring injury. He's been back the last 2. Injuries, in fact, have plagued him a little bit these last few seasons, but the Jaguars gave him a huge contract extension this past off season. He's clearly their best cornerback, and he has been known to shadow a top receiver. And I think that's probably what we're going to see here against A.J. Brown, the Eagles' top receiver. And A.J. told me as much by his locker stall when I talked to him. I think it was on Thursday. He says he's expecting as much. We'll find out early in the game, just the way they defend him. You can look and see and get a feel for whether they're going to have Campbell follow him. That kind of puts them in a lot of man situations typically. But this is a defense that favors playing a lot of man-to-man coverage. So you should see, various concepts that are trying to spring up receivers in terms of mesh concepts, pick plays, etc. But you'll also see AJ get matched up on the outside alone, and back shoulders goes, etc. That we all know that he can win. And I think while Campbell is a good cornerback, there aren't many in the NFL that AJ Brown isn't going to win when he's matched up against them. So it could be a banner day for him. We've seen obviously the offense adjust and become a little more of a run-based offense these last 3 games. Successfully so in the last 3, but more so against the Giants and last week against the Bengals. I think you're going to continue to see that with the Eagles, at least, trying to get Saquon Barkley going early. But I think, Nick Sirianni, Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts, they would be negligent if they didn't really take advantage of what the Eagles have on the outside at wide receiver. And A.J. Brown versus Campbell is a matchup that I think is going to be intriguing to watch, because I think it's one that is probably the best matchup that the Jaguars may have in the secondary, but still it's one that favors the Eagles.
With all of that being said, Jeff, what is your final score prediction for today?
Yeah, I'm no surprise here. I'm going with the Eagles against a Jaguars team that isn't quite reeling. You might have said that after the first month when they went 0-4. They played a little bit better of late, of winning 2 of their last 4. They lost a close one at home against the Packers last week. They're getting some guys back, as you guys talked about. Trevor Lawrence is playing a little more consistent of late, and I think they figured some things out on the offensive side, but they're down. They're down some players. Brian Thompson looks like he's going to play, so that kind of keeps them in it a little bit. Gabe Davis is out. Brandon Scherf, they're one of their top guards. He'll be playing as well, so it's not as dire as maybe it looked coming in. But defensively, the Jaguars, they're bad. The metrics are bad. What you see on film is bad. There isn't a lot of creativity. It's a 4-man rush all the time. They don't blitz very much. They play a lot of man. Even when they go into the zone, it's like cover 1 or 2. It's like there's not a lot of diversity there. So I feel like the Eagles have a pretty significant advantage on the offensive side, and I assume they're going to take advantage of it. So I see the Eagles winning 34-23. It could be bigger than that, but I could see maybe Doug kind of hanging in there into the fourth quarter.
EJ, where's your head at going into this game?
Yeah, I mostly see it the same way as Jeff. I had it a little bit closer. I had a 28-23 win. The Eagles have a massive advantage on paper. I definitely think they could win this game in a blowout. Maybe I'm giving too much credit to Doug Peterson. I feel like he could throw the kitchen sink at this one, back at the link. It could. I mostly am predicting that the game it would then the matchups might suggest, and maybe I'll regret that if they end up winning by a lot. But yeah, I had them basically a close game, like I said, Eagles 28, Jaguars 23.
All right, I think I have the biggest margin of victory for the Eagles, 34-21, a victory at home, going 4-0 coming out of the bye week. I think that the Eagles, even though they are down some key players themselves, the Jaguars are missing a lot of players, and I still think that the Eagles have favorable matchups across the board, particularly when it comes to their offense versus this Jaguars defense. It just is not a very formidable group outside of their edge rushers, and even still, they're not having a whole lot of success getting pressure on the quarterback. I think had Fred Johnson not made me feel maybe a little bit better after last week's performance, I would have had a little bit of a different opinion, maybe a closer score. However, I think Johnson really proved me wrong. I think I was sitting here with you guys literally a week ago saying, I don't know if I can take this Eagles team. I don't know if I can take Johnson versus Trey Hendrickson. And he proved me wrong. So credit where credit is due. I'm going with the Eagles this week. Again, 34-21. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Casino. Just as a reminder, you can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day to follow along with us throughout the game as we chat with all of you in real time. So we look forward to seeing you there.
And please keep up with more Eagles coverage on my podcast, Uncovering the Birds. New episodes released every week. Listen to wherever you get your podcasts or go to inquirer.com/podcast.
That's all for today, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to Gameday Central.